Greetings, friends. So the other evening I was listening to a live stream on Sam Shamoun's channel. He's an apologist for Orthodoxy. I had listened to some of his content, not that much before. He seems to be pretty capable and well versed, and he had on his channel Cabane, who's a young man, very intellectually sophisticated, very knowledgeable, although a lot of the stuff he says goes over my head, all the references he makes. I think he needs to juxtapose it a bit with the position he was trying to dismantle, which was the Calvinist, what they called the Calvinist attack, he was talking about the Orthodox defense of Scripture against Calvinism. I don't disagree with anything Cabane says, but near the end of his exposition, Sam Shamoun gave the audience a chance to ask questions. And initially, Sam Shamoun said, look, it has to be directly related to these passages we've been talking about, or the Calvinist usage of these passages.
I'm still looking for questions. Come on, guys. Were you that overwhelmed by the facts and the exegesis that you're still recovering? There's no questions? Okay, I'm still waiting, brother. If not,
I'm happy to take questions, not just on like the things that I said in my my presentation, but just kind of if there's a text you're wondering about, like how does
you heard him.
Think of that.
He's being more gracious than me, and he's got more hair than me. So he's saying you can ask him on anything. Go ahead, hit with your best shot. As we wait for the questions, I'll sing the song.
For roughly the next half hour, they discussed several questions related to the concept of synergy, and then
I'm trying to find questions. There's one that's not really relevant, and
I don't know if Sam Shamoun was specifically referring to my question, but I am assuming he was. So I was disappointed that my question was blatantly ignored, even though we were given the green light to openly ask things. I mean, it's an important question, and it does relate to Protestantism generally. I mean, maybe okay if it's an inconvenient question, then you could say, well, okay, this question is a bit off topic, and then just give 10 seconds to it, 15 seconds, and then okay, move on to the next. Then at least you're acknowledging it. Does the fact that the English-speaking countries have no national Orthodox church of their own testify or represent a chastisement by God towards our peoples? Because we have, not only are we mostly non-Orthodox in most of our population, we also have no national church at all whatsoever to speak of, even like the way Britain had the Anglican Church, although that church has fallen, but it was still a national church, or maybe Presbyterian Church in Scotland, I don't know. But still, the idea of a national institutional church, or in Roman Catholic countries, of course, like France, would like a confessional state, in other words, like the state supports an institutional church, and ideally the society, at least the majority of the society, agree with that and support that. That is the dominant culture. That holds the society together. The monarch will cooperate with the bishops in ensuring this, and the people will support this. This is a confessional state. We had this for centuries, and even in the pagan world, they would have had the same idea that it's basic tribal reality. Not to say that tribalism is the answer, but because Christianity moves beyond that, but it does allow for you to have national churches. I think that's Orthodox. I think I can say that. So the lack of any the fact that we don't have an Orthodox church in England or Roman Catholic countries, but they're still, in that regard, they're still closer to Orthodoxy. But we don't have anything like that in Canada or the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. So if you take the view of Orthodoxy that there is one true Holy Catholic Apostolic Church, then obviously we're outside. We're out left in the cold, and maybe it's time to come home. And I think increasingly people are starting to do that. And when you ignore a question like this, it's kind of unwise, I think, because this is a very pressing issue, and most of your audience, I mean, you're speaking English, right? So a lot of your audience is going to be from these countries, like especially the United States. Are we chastised by God? What was it for the Reformation? Was it for something related to that? Because we are outside the church, the notion that we would need to belong to one church seems foreign to us. And for myself, I find myself in the position of joining the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia. Now, ideally, I would like to join a Canadian Orthodox Church, but a Canadian Orthodox Church doesn't exist. There's the Orthodox Church of America, but that's not on much of a scale at all. And from what I understand, there's been a lot of liberalizing in it, and yet they operate also in Canada. So is a Canadian English speaker supposed to join an Orthodox Church of America church in Canada? No, I think more of us who are sincere would honestly be in the position of going to a foreign culture like Russian. And I'm not ethnically Russian. I don't speak Russian. I don't know Old Slavonic. But I mean, I have some Latvian background on my mother's side, and on my father's side, it would go back to England and Ireland, maybe some German. But I'm Canadian. I was born in Canada. And so we look around at I look around at my fellow Canadians. They're my people, or a certain segment of them are my people, but it's also, in a spiritual sense, a chaotic and desolate landscape. We're looking for order, we're looking for tradition, we're looking for hierarchy. Where do you find that? We can light bonfires of nationalism, but that's not going to get you through the long winter. You need to have something deeper than that, and that's what Orthodoxy offers. But whoever is carrying the standard unfortunately, it's not in the English-speaking world. And I would have to follow the Russians, and then so that gets into are you for Canada first? Are you for America first? I mean, but then if you want, it's like, well, no, ideally we would like to have a Canadian Orthodox Church, but we don't have that. And there is some lesson there. There is some lesson, I think. It would seem to me that we are chastised. We are left out in the cold. We left generations and generations ago. We left that old order. And it's time for us to come home. We're in the position where we're seriously considering going to a congregation where English is not the primary language, where English is spoken as like a second language for the primary congregation. And I'm not against having the liturgy in a different language. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because you can always learn what's being said in the liturgy. It's not that hard to go and read, what's being said. But in terms of what might the sermon be in, or what's the general conversation going to be like with people? Obviously, if you're in Canada, people are going to speak English, but it's still, in a way, like you're now following the leadership of. I'm following the leadership of Russia, and ultimately, not Russia. It's about God, because what empire is doing more for Christianity right now, America or Russia? They're not perfect. There's a lot of evil in Russia, but I think the answer would be obvious. Which of these empires is more on the side of Christianity at this time in history? That would be Russia, obviously. So, but it's not in an ideal situation. I've talked to a Orthodox priest who does come to this church where I attend, and he was out in Saskatchewan for a time, but he talked with people there who were sympathetic to Orthodoxy, but the language barrier was a significant thing for them. But obviously if you were really sincere, you wouldn't let the language barrier be a stumbling block. But it does point to the wider difference that people want to be organically integrated, to have the church as part of your local community organically. But we've been so splintered from that and disconnected and uprooted that we're now in this searching period where people are finding their own people, and it's causing geographical movements, ideological movements, lots of cultural upheaval and change. English speaking Canadians are so chastised by God that we can't, half the time we can't even get one of our own to even represent us. like Randy Hillier, I guess he's from Ontario. I mean, he's really authentic and grassroots, but he's more of like that, almost like Eastern or Maritimes or like Irish kind of, or maybe he's French. I don't know, but it's more of that like really old stock Canadian spirit that you don't always see. And someone like Maxime Bernier, kind of a goofy French Canadian guy. When he's charismatic in his speeches, it sounds goofy, kind of, but and there's just these vague platitudes about freedom and, resist this tyranny when revolution becomes a necessity. And it's like, where is God in any of this? And my fellow white Canadians, shouting at people on the street to take off their mask, and you look stupid with that mask on, and take it off, dumb, and just like a lot more divisiveness. Like, where is the Christian spirit in any of this? This is almost like Nietzschean Ubermensch kind of like will to power stuff that was predicted that would happen. And it's kind of ugly, so I'm not sure how much more I want to be a part of this whole thing. Hasta luego, amigos.
You heard him.
Think of that.
He's being more gracious than me. So he's saying you can ask him on anything. Go ahead. You can ask him on anything. Go ahead.